PlayStation 6 is coming possibly as soon as next year. And from the rumors, it looks like we're getting two different consoles, both a handheld and a traditional set-top box. And now strategically for Sony, what this is going to mean is that Microsoft is no longer the main competitor, Nintendo is. This new PS6 Portable is going to compete directly with the Switch 2, and I think that's the whole reason they're making it. We'll get into the details in a moment, but basically, yeah, two new consoles from Sony coming next year. And these PS6s, they'll be able to play fully ray-traced, path-traced games at 60 FPS, with a little help from upscaling, of course. And so in this video, I'm first going to talk about the handheld, then we'll talk about the traditional console, then I'm going to tell you what price I think we're going to be looking at for this thing and when it's going to be coming out. We'll wrap up with my own thoughts, and yeah, let's go ahead and start the video. Please, if you've made it this far, hit that like button. If you know my content and you like it, please subscribe. And so now let's talk about that handheld. The chip for it has a code name of Canis, so that's our smaller mobile chip. And yeah, this thing is going to be competing with the Switch 2, basically. Nintendo is Sony's primary competition now that Xbox has kind of bowed out of the console market. I mean, they're going to be doing their pseudo-console PC thing, but really, at this point, Nintendo and Sony are the only two companies making traditional consoles. So Nintendo, whether they like it or not, are competing with Sony, and Sony's competing with Nintendo. And that's what this portable is going to be all about. If you look at Japan, Switch is number one. They beat out the PS4 and the PS5. They sold way more Switch 1s, and Switch 2's doing great, you know, but yeah. And they're both Japanese companies, so I imagine they want to do well on their home turf. And I think Sony is coming for Nintendo this generation. That's what this portable is all about. Now, Sony's going to position this as a premium handheld. It's going to be a little bit more expensive than the Switch. Not too much more expensive, but a little bit more expensive than the Switch because it's going to be phenomenally more powerful. Way, way, way more powerful. But it's not as powerful as a PS5. So real quick, let's just go over the specs, okay? Now, a lot of these specs I've gotten from Moore's Law is Dead. He pretty much broke all the info on Canis and Orion that's out there, the chips for PS6. And so credit to him. I may even have something on screen right now, I'm not sure, from him. But yeah, this system has a 6-core processor, AMD of course, and it's only got 4 cores that the games can access. They'll have 8 threads available, but the other 2 cores are reserved for the system and background processes. It's going to have an RDNA 5 based GPU, and it's going to be pretty powerful for a mobile handheld, but, you know, not quite as powerful as the PS5. And so when we come to backwards compatibility, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Developers are going to have to do some tricks to get it to work on here exactly, so it's not going to be real backwards compatibility in the direct sense. You can't just take a vanilla PS5 game and play it on this handheld. That's probably not going to work. But because it's RDNA 5, it's going to have their new Radiance cores, and it's supposed to be way, way, way more powerful at ray tracing than any of the prior AMD GPUs were capable of. According to Moore's Law, it's dead. The console version, the set-top box, it's going to be 10 to 12 times the ray tracing performance of the base PS5. And so I don't know what that translates into for the handheld, but I imagine it'll probably be more powerful than the PS5 Pro, even when you're walking around in handheld mode. When it comes to raster, not so much. Raster, it's going to be definitely lower performance, but when it comes to ray tracing, this thing's going to be really, really powerful. And of course, it's going to have a fast storage on it, probably similar to the system, probably an NVMe Generation 5. They're going to have a pretty good screen on this thing, I imagine. I don't know if it's going to be OLED or LCD. I haven't really heard anything about that. We can speculate. Hopefully it's OLED, but Nintendo went with LCD for the Switch too, so all bets are off until we get some more info on that. Now, RAM is kind of up in the air right now. The rumors up until now have said that there's going to be about probably 24 gigabytes of RAM, shared RAM that, you know, can go to the GPU or the CPU because that's how modern consoles work. It's not split up like on PC. But yeah, you got 24 gigs of RAM in this thing. That's more than the PS5. Some of that will be reserved for the operating system stuff, so game developers won't get that full amount, but a really, really big amount of RAM available to them. And for things like path tracing, AI upscaling, it's going to have, you know, a lot of bandwidth available for them to do those kind of things. Now, because RAM prices have gone through the roof, tripled, quadrupled in the past 6 months, they may scale that back. They might say maybe we can get away with, 21 gigabytes of RAM or 18 gigabytes of RAM. I think the type of RAM they're using is going to be in multiples of 3, is why I'm saying those numbers. But yeah, hopefully it's the 24 gigabytes because we want to see an increase from the last generation, even on this handheld system. But yeah, this is going to be a full Gen 10 console, even though it's handheld. And just like the Switch 2, it's going to dock. And you're going to hook up a controller and just use it with your TV the same way. And so now what this gives Sony is the ability to have a lightweight, cheaper version of the PS6 for people. One complaint that a lot of the gaming community has had for the PS5 is just how expensive it is. And it's gotten even more expensive lately. I mean, the PS5 Pro is now like $900, which is crazy for a console, but that's where we are right now in the world. And so now, because there's going to be a docked mode, that means that developers have to target 2 different profiles for this system. You're going to be able to do a little bit more graphics, maybe a little bit more resolution or something whenever it's docked because there's more juice, and you don't have the same concerns you do whenever it's in handheld mode, just like we see over on the Switch. And now, as I talked about in one of my videos a few months ago, there are new profiles for developers to target on the PS5 called low power mode. Now, this seems like, it's some kind of altruistic, let's save the planet, let's save some energy, save your power bill, save you some money. Whatever the reason is, that's the story for it right now. But realistically, I think everybody knows that this is actually the compatibility mode for going forward to PS6 mobile. So if you take your game, you port it to this PS5 low power profile, which surprisingly enough only supports 8 threads, just like this console, this handheld. And yeah, I'm pretty confident that that's what they exist for. There is one for the PS5 and one for the PS5 Pro. I personally believe that the PS5 low power profile will be what runs for back compat whenever you are in handheld mode, and whenever you dock the system, you'll get the PS5 Pro's low power mode. The handheld can technically play PS5 and PS5 Pro enhanced games, but they will have to be developed and compiled and packaged for these new low power profiles to be able to move forward. And now, I mentioned earlier ray tracing. I think this is now the generation where PlayStation can path trace. PS6, whether it's mobile or the set-top box traditional console, either one, you're going to be able to play fully ray traced, path trace games. That's up to the developer what they want to do. Obviously, we'll still see hybrid RT and raster. We'll still see plenty of traditional raster games and things. But if you want to do super powerful high-end graphics, it's going to be there. And even for indies, it's going to be a boon, because if you target these platforms and you don't have to worry about baking lighting, that's going to save you a ton of development time. Plus, most games are made in Unreal 5 now. Probably half the AAA games or more out there are Unreal 5 now. And Unreal 5 is probably going to be optimized to run really, really well in the system and really leverage that ray tracing ability to make it much more performant than even on the base model PS5, despite having a lower power CPU. That's kind of the whole beauty of Lumen and the system they created with Unreal 5, is it's going to scale between the PS5 and the PS6 generations really well. I was saying it's going to have a docked mode. I don't know if you're going to actually get the dock in the package with it, because, that costs money. You got to get the hardware for that dock, even though it's mostly just a piece of plastic and a couple wires. But then you're going to also need a controller, right? Like, this isn't going to be like the Switch where the controllers separate from the side, I don't think. I think they're going to be built-in permanent, just like the traditional PSP and the Portal. This is going to be one solid piece. So if you want to play it in docked mode, you're going to have a controller. Which brings us to the question, will they actually sell you a handheld, a dock, and a controller? That seems a lot if this console's purpose is to be their cheap option. I think they'll have the handheld available by itself without a dock, and then they'll have a bundle that comes with the dock and a DualSense controller. Now, I made the same prediction for Switch 2 and it did not come true, but I feel a lot more confident that Sony will follow this path. I guess the only thing I haven't really gone over is battery life. We don't really have any info on how long it's going to last. It's probably just going to be a couple hours. That's how a lot of these modern handhelds work. They're not going to last you 6, 8, 20 hours, you're probably gonna get like 3 or 4 hours of this thing, maybe even 2 at worst. But I hope Sony invests in a really high quality battery and does a lot of tweaks and things to make sure that you do get a pretty good lifespan out of this thing if you're playing handheld. But now let's talk about the traditional console, the set-top box that's going to sit in your living room connected to a TV. Some would say that this is the actual PS6. Moore's Law, the leaker, says this is the PS6. I personally think that they're going to do something a little different. I think they might market it as the Pro. Now, I haven't asked Tom over there about what he thought on that in a thread somewhere, and he told me that no, he doesn't think so. He's actually seen documentation that calls them PS6 Portable and PS6. But I think that Sony really should call it the PS6 Pro because I don't think they're going to have a mid-gen refresh this generation. Microsoft was kind of pushing them into it because they knew they were going to do one too. They ended up backing up and canceling on them. Now they're not even making a traditional console. Nintendo hasn't really done the Pro stuff in a while. It's not since new 3DS, I guess was the last time they had a Pro console. But yeah, there's probably not going to be a PS6 Pro. So this basically is the PS6 Pro. This is the thing that if you have a PS5 Pro, you're going to want to buy. If you have a PS5 Pro and you get the handheld, it's going to be a downgrade. I mean, you're going to be able to play it handheld. You'll have that new feature and that ability. That'll be great if that's what you want. But in terms of performance, you need to upgrade to this box if you want an actually more powerful system than what the PS5 and the PS5 Pro offer today. But yeah, these are basically Sony's answer to the Series S and X. The handheld is their S, the low power, cheaper one, and the X is the more expensive, more powerful system. But they're both going to be part of the same generation, and developers are going to be required to make games that are compatible with both. They're not going to be able to say, oh, I'm just making a mobile game, or I'm making one that's just for the Pro. You're going to have to target all three profiles, I'm pretty sure, in terms of the developer agreement Sony makes with people in contracts. So, all that said, this is going to be a really powerful console. It's believed to be possibly about 3 times as powerful in terms of raster performance, traditional raster performance. But when it comes to ray tracing, this thing is supposed to be 10 to 12 times as powerful, like phenomenally better. And this should help them catch up to basically NVIDIA levels. Like, according to Moore's Law is Dead, from the people he's talking to, they're saying it's basically like probably 40, 90, 50, 80 performance from ray tracing, which is amazing for a game console, especially one that's going to be under $1,000. And so yeah, this system, games will run path traced at a reasonable resolution with some upscaling, and at 60 frames a second. I fully believe that. Now, not all games will. Some games won't be well optimized. They'll be running at like 30, 40 frames per second. And then some games, they'll probably use FrameGen and weird stuff that they probably shouldn't be playing with. But maybe they use FrameGen to get us up to 120 from that 60. That could actually be reasonable, because FrameGen is useful once you get past the 60 threshold. It's just a big danger no-no under 60. That's going to give you a really laggy, poor performance. But if you're targeting 120 hertz, we probably will see FrameGen applied, because there's going to be a lot of AI capability, like a lot of tops in this thing. I can't remember exactly how much, but it's way more powerful than any console has been in terms of doing tensor core math for the AI there. Plus, we'll probably get PSSR 2 and hopefully some kind of ray regeneration reconstruction type tool that's going to replace the denoising that was traditionally done to just be part of the same pass that's done whenever it is upscaling and anti-aliasing it. By combining those steps in the render process, you can actually potentially get even faster performance from switching over to one of these AI-based systems. So now let's talk specs. On your screen, I should have some specs up, probably from Moore's Law is Dead, yet again, same leaker. And yeah, this thing's running the latest Zen 6 processor, so it's going to be way, way more powerful than that, I think it was, Zen 2 processor that's in the PS5. Yeah, you're going to see a big uplift in CPU on here, even though it's still going to be just 8 cores. But those cores are going to run at a faster clock speed, and with the newer architecture, that will probably also give it a huge boost. I don't know the percentage, probably not twice as powerful, but considerably more powerful just from being 3 generations ahead and having a newer architecture. Now, the rumors on RAM for this one is that this was supposed to have 30 gigabytes of RAM in it, but that's in question now. It might get scaled down to 24 just to match up with the handheld, just to save money because RAM is so crazy expensive right now. But I hope they keep it in there because I really wish they had 32 or 40 gigs of RAM in this thing. You hope to see big jumps generation to generation. We already had 16 gigs of RAM in the PS5, so why not double it this generation? Hopefully, that's what us gamers would want, at least, and developers too, sure. The storage in it is going to be about 3 times as fast as the PS5's, about 15,000 megabytes or whatever the metric is on those, and yeah, it's going to be super, super fast. I don't know how you get faster than PS5 because it's already crazy fast, but they're going to do it. In fact, all those big grandiose promises they made about being able to like swap stuff out of memory with stuff on the hard drive because you could stream stuff in so quickly, maybe that actually comes to fruition in this generation. This generation might even be a bigger leap than some people are expecting just because of how much difference a fully path-traced image is compared to raster and even hybrid raster with some ray tracing mixed in. Like, when you added ray traced reflections or ray traced shadows to a game, you didn't see a huge difference. But when you flip from raster to full path tracing, there is a huge difference because every single pixel that's actually being rendered is getting its own rays of light. There is no hacks and cheats. They're just simulating light like the real world works now. And that's going to be a huge boon to developers because now they don't have to sit around waiting for hours to bake out lightings every time they make a tweak to a scene. Now they're going to be able to just create the scene, give it to you, and there you go, which hopefully reduces the time on these games. Maybe we can get games down from taking 5, 6, 10 years to like 3 or 4 years. That would be really awesome, and I think ray tracing and path tracing are the key to that in a big way. So now the other thing to talk about on here is the disk drive. The handheld, obviously, it's not going to have a disk drive. It'll have backwards compatibility with digital games, but not with your discs. Maybe you can plug it in via USB port whenever it's docked. But if you want to play disc-based physical media games, you're going to need the console that is a traditional console and sits beside your television. Now, they may follow what they did with the PS6 Slim and the Pro, where you have a whole separate module that you optionally buy and install. I hope they don't do that. I haven't been a big fan of the add-on drive. I feel like it is a bit flaky, it's noisy, it's not as good as the built-in one in the original PS5. So I would love it if it's just an internal drive. Every single Orion, whether to call it PS5 or PS5 Pro, this console will hopefully have that in every system, but that's just me hoping. Realistically, to save money, and because Sony and all these other guys are trying to phase this out, they might just make it an add-on. And now the other thing that's interesting here is backwards compatibility. The PS4 had no backwards compatibility whatsoever. Couldn't even play a music CD. But the PS5 can go back to the PS4 because they're the same architecture, right? It's really easy to jump between PS5 and PS4 because they're both using AMD processors. They're not using some kind of crazy emotion engine or the Cell or anything like that. They are just PC parts. And so it's going to be a lot easier for that transition between those two. However, emulators exist. Nintendo uses them on the really old, slow mobile Switch, right? It can play old Super Nintendo games and stuff, and now they've got GameCube games playing on the Switch too. There's no excuse for Sony not to follow the same path. Put some kind of emulator so that we can finally play PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and yes, PlayStation 3 games on the system. If they want it to be a premium, expensive console, then I think that's what they need to give gamers to make it worth our while. Like, I'll get into price in a minute, but we're getting really close to that $1,000 range, like crazy expensive. And if I'm paying that much money for a game console for a PlayStation, I really do expect it to play all 5, 6 generations of games. There's really no excuse for Sony to not do this with this generation, because Digital Foundry just recently did a test on the base PS5 running Linux. It was jailbroken, but by running Linux on there, they were able to run ray trace games, path trace games. They were able to do all sorts of things, but they ran RPS3 on there and found that it ran pretty well. Like, a lot of games worked just fine. Some of them had problems, but it seems like the base PS5 can almost handle PS3's capabilities. So this new system being much more powerful, there's no excuse anymore. This system should definitely be powerful enough to run a PS3 emulator on it. So I'm really hoping that this generation we get full backwards compatibility, but we'll just have to wait and see. All right, let's talk about those prices. It's not gonna be pretty, y'all. Sorry. The world's crazy right now. Tariffs, wars, RAM, all AI. It's a mess out there, and everything's crazy expensive. You already know that. And so this is going to affect the prices of these consoles. It already has, right? You know, we've seen console prices go up and up and up again over the course of this generation, which is the opposite of everything prior to Gen 9. But that's how things seem to be now. And so I really, asked me 2 years ago, I would have told you that the next PS6 is probably going to launch at about $500. I can't tell you that now because that's just not reality anymore. The handheld, I believe it's going to be about $650, maybe $550. $550, I think, only works if they have only the handheld and no dock and no controller. I could see them being like $550 for the handheld by itself and $650 for a bundle that has the handheld, a controller, and a dock all together. Because they charge like, what, $80-something just for that controller by itself. So with the dock included, I'm sure they will bump it up $100. But then when it comes to the set-top box, whether they call it PS6 and that's it, or they call it PS6 Pro, it's going to cost like a PS5 Pro. It's going to be up in that $800, $900 range. I am hoping that maybe we see it at about like $850. But I don't think we're going to drop below $800 unless the RAM prices drop down to where they used to be 6 months ago, and that doesn't seem like it's going to be happening in time for the launch window. It is... Let's talk about that now, actually. It's probably coming out in 2027. It was originally rumored in 2027-ish. You know, everything's all murky in rumor world, but then there was a lot of rumors a few months ago that said, oh, they're going to push it back because of the RAM prices and yada yada. We're going to probably see it in like 2028, 2029, maybe even 2030. But that seems to have fizzled out, and we're back to 2027 now. Lisa Su made an announcement that AMD would have the GPU for the Xbox Helix ready in time for a launch in the fall of 2027, and that is the same exact processor series that this is going to be using. So that means the technology, RDNA 5, Zen 6, these things will be ready to go in 2027 as long as Sony is too. I think we're going to see it next year in fall of 2027. It might be pushed back to maybe spring of 28, worst case fall of 2028, but I really don't think that's going to happen. I think we'll see it probably next fall. Now, people can argue that's too early, we've barely seen what the PS5 can do, but the reality is PlayStations get released every 7 years. Just look at the last few generations. That seems to be the cadence they've got. I thought they'd go with 8 years personally. If you asked me a few years ago, I would have said, you know, probably 8 years after release, because we had COVID and stuff that kind of made things weird, and it's almost like we lost a year there, right? So it's like, make it 8 years. Plus, these consoles, you keep getting diminishing returns with each generation. You would think each generation should last longer than the last, right? You know, we saw that with the Switch. It was around for a good 8.5 years before the Switch 2 came out. I'm kind of surprised that Sony wouldn't want to do the same thing, but it seems that that's not the case. It seems like we're probably going to get it late 2027, early 2028. And yeah, it's not going to be cheap. I'm sure if we didn't have all these crazy tariffs and war and RAM shortages and things, that, you know, we'd probably see these things at $100, maybe even $200 less than what I'm saying here. But as long as reality keeps on the path that it's on, that's kind of the reality of the prices that we're going to be seeing. And so now with Sony having both a handheld and a console, that means developers are going to have to support both, right? Really, they're going to support way more than just 2, though. They might be have to support up to 7 different game profiles if they're making a cross-gen game. But we'll get into that in a second. Let's start with this generation. First, we've got the handheld. Then you've got the handheld in docked mode. You're going to get a little bit more performance, a little bit more juice whenever you're in that docked mode. So that means the developer is going to have to build 2 different versions of the game for those 2 modes that it can switch between in there. There are 2 different targets for them to develop towards. Then you've got the set-top box. So that's 3 different consoles that I think are going to be required to support. 3 different profiles, as Sony calls it, I believe, in their SDK. You're going to have 3 of them mandatory if you want to have a PS6 game out there. If you want to have a cross-gen game that's on PS5 too, we're going to need minimum now 4 different versions you're tracking. And if you support the Pro, that's 5. If you support the low power modes for both Pro and the regular, that's now 7 different profiles you have to build for, you have to test for, you have to look at each one individually and make sure they all work. That's a lot of work for developers, especially when the whole benefit of a console is that you're not supposed to have to worry about all these different hardware permutations like you would in PC land. So for developers, this might be a little frustrating, but it also just seems to be the reality. You know, they're basically doing what Microsoft did last generation with the S and the X. And because it's a handheld, that makes it 3 profiles. Now the good thing about this is that whenever Sony is ready to release their cheapest version of the PS6, they can strip that screen off and the battery out, and they're going to have to include a controller, which has some cost, but I think they're going to make a PS6 Slim. Maybe they call it PS6 Lite because it's not, you know, as powerful as the other set-top box, and it's not the same thing. So they might not want to go with the Slim nomenclature, but if they want to go with terms that they've used before, let's just call this the Slim, regardless of what it actually gets called. So this is basically the handheld minus being handheld, permanently docked. But the good thing about that is developers don't have to have yet another profile to target. They will just target the same profiles they already have. It'll just basically be permanently in docked mode. So if it's a PS6 game, it'll be PS6 handheld docked, and this little PS6 Lite puck or whatever it ends up looking like, some kind of little mini PC, that is going to be the same exact thing. So developers don't have to worry about that. So that's really smart. And then when we're looking at backwards stuff, they'll probably be using the low power mode for the Pro on this thing. And so, yeah, you support those 2, and this new version is already done. You don't have to think about it, which is smart. And it's a really good way for Sony to bring the cost down because these things are so expensive. So if they can get it down below $500, that's going to be a real achievement. And I really hope to see this thing come out at about $400, maybe $450. And now one more other thing I want to point out is we're probably going to see a huge cross-gen period with this. You know, when the PS5 came out, we had 2 or 3 years there where every single game that came out pretty much was on PS4 and PS5, which means they didn't take a lot of advantage of the PS5. It really wasn't until we got to about the 3rd or 4th year in the cycle that we started seeing games that did not support PS4 and were just PS5 games, and suddenly they were able to use more features, they were able to put more ray tracing and things into them that weren't capable on the PS4 because they were no longer held back by it. Unfortunately, PS5 is going to hold the PS6 back for a while, but PS5 is pretty good and powerful. It's not going to be as bad because the CPU in it's actually decent, unlike the one that was in the PS4, which was basically a bad laptop show, let's say. But so yeah, I'd go ahead and get ready that probably the first 3, maybe even 5 years of this thing, we're going to see most games cross-gen. And so now lastly, what do I think about this? How do I feel about this personally? I'm not really a handheld person, so I don't really care about the handheld. If they do actually strip the screen out and make a light version, that could be pretty cool. I think that's a smart move. But for me, the only one of these that I'm probably going to buy is the set-top box with the Orion chip in it. That is what I'm interested in personally. I mean, I already have a PS5 Pro, and because of that long cross-gen period, as I was just saying, I'm probably not even going to buy one of these at launch. Maybe I should, since the price is probably going to go up over time, as we're seeing, but I don't know. It's going to have to be really, really impressive to make me believe that I need it on launch day. Now, if I only had the base PS5, might be a different story. But, yeah. How do you feel, you know? Let me know in the comments, are you interested in this PS6? Are you going to get the handheld? Are you going to get the set-top box? Are you going to get both? Like, what do you all feel about that? Let me know. But anyway, I think I've gone on enough about this today. Are you excited about the PS6? Please let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please, do the YouTube thing, like and subscribe and all those things. Although I may put this on PeerTube also at some point, so PeerTubers do the same, please. But yeah, this system, this set of systems is pretty exciting, and I always am interested in new hardware. That's kind of the main thing we talk about here on this channel. So always exciting times to see that. I love seeing the latest in graphics and technology, and it's gonna be great. But at the same time, the world's pretty crazy right now, and money's tight for everybody, self included. So going out and buying a new console today isn't super exciting to me, right? Anyway, thanks for watching the video. If you want to see more of my stuff, hit that subscribe button. I'm toying with the idea of starting up some kind of Patreon or something of that sort. So if you'd be interested in trying to help motivate me to make more videos and things, let me know. It is hard to find time to make these videos sometimes. I know it's been a couple months since I put out my last video. I'm probably not going to be putting out videos as regularly as I used to be honest, with my current life situation. Probably about once a month is the realistic target for me now, which I'd love to make more videos than that, but yeah. So if YouTube can become an income source, that'd be great. But currently I've got I think I got 698 subscribers or something. Not great, This is a pretty small channel here. So yeah, please subscribe, it'll help a lot. Really hoping to try to hit 1,000 subscribers this year. That'd be really awesome. And yeah, if the world hasn't blown up by 2027, PS6 is coming. Alright, I'll see you next time.